This is Kathy Fuggle, who is a teacher at Tanglen Trust School, who's taught both in Thailand and in Singapore, and will be sharing some of her experiences. Hi Kathy, so would you like to start off with telling us a little bit about your experience with working overseas?
So I worked in Bangkok for 5 years in a big international school there, Harrow International School. The majority of our children were actually Thai, although we did obviously have some expat children there. Some of the children were 100% Thai and some of them had mixed race parenting. So one parent would be a European and one Thai, and then some pure expat children as well.
Yeah. And what's been your experience at Tanglen Trust School?
The children here, children from all nationalities. I'm teaching in year 2 here, and children from absolutely everywhere here: Norway, Thailand, England, India, Africa, all over, absolutely pretty much everywhere.
And in your class discussions, have you found that most children identify with their home country or their passport country?
It's quite interesting actually, because a lot of them they have on our network down as British, but then when we talk about a particular country, they'll pipe up saying, "Oh, I'm Filipino" or something. Depends really. They kind of interchange between. If we're doing a topic on that, then they suddenly identify with being that country, and other times they'll identify with being British because we're a British school. So they seem quite interchangeable, to be honest.
And you started your career in the United Kingdom. Did you
Yes.
find that their experiences with how they identified themselves culturally has been different to your experience with working internationally?
I think really in the UK they never really talked about it that much, to be honest. It just was it never really surfaced as much as it does in international setting. I think because in an international setting we celebrate their kind of internationalness much more. International days, we study countries in much more depth. In the UK we kind of have a fairly sort of peripheral look at Diwali or something. It's not such a it's not something we really look at as much, I think, as we do in international schools.
And do you find any of the children that you teach, or perhaps your own children, do you find any have a confused outlook as to what their cultural background is?
Yes, definitely. My daughter was actually born in Thailand, but now lives in Singapore. Sometimes she actually tells people I'm Thai, and obviously she's white with blonde hair, so they look rather confused. And other times she tells people that she's English, but she's never actually been to England ever. So she's definitely, from my personal experience, she's sort of a little bit confused herself. And lots of the children in the class are like that here.
And at home, do you have a very British style home here in Singapore? Or?
No, not at all. And really, I don't envision we'll ever go back to the UK. And so it is quite strange that she has this concept that she's British, but she has no concept of what that actually means. We're not particularly English at home. We don't really push being English, but she also knows that she's English. So it's quite strange. I do sort of wonder what's the best way to deal with that.
And now that your family live in Singapore, does your daughter identify with any of the local customs or festivities?
She regularly tells me she can speak Chinese because she's better at speaking Chinese than me. So when Chinese people speak, she says that she can. She says she can understand them, and I noticed that with some of the children in the class. They say the same things, that they say I can understand Chinese when they understand only 1 or 2 words.
And just with your own teaching experience, how is your teaching experience in Singapore different to perhaps that in the UK?
Really from the perspective of, in Thailand, the children were culturally very quiet, quite passive learners. The UK very much engaged, but obviously we had some different behavioural issues in the UK. And here you're sort of that happy medium where because we've got children from all around the world, we've got all sorts of different cultures coming together, but because they're being educated in a British curriculum, they're encouraged to be sort of more interactive. So I definitely noticed those cultural differences between the 3 schools.
Yeah. And finally, how do you find at Tanglen here, when we've celebrated events such as the Golden Jubilee and so forth, how do you find the children respond that aren't British?
They still really enjoy it. I don't know how much they really identify with it. They still really enjoy it, but I wouldn't say that because it's not personal to them.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, when we're celebrating something like Chinese New Year and then they can go home, they're actually doing it and they're actually seeing it and it's actually tangible to them. But to them, it's a sort of abstract concept really.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.